Let's begin the unit circle with the degrees. We first have the 360 degrees, then we have the 90 degrees, then we have the 180, then we have the 270. A few angles inside each quadrant that we should all know. The first one would be 30 degrees, the second one would be 45, then 60. That would complete our first quadrant. Then moving on to quadrant 2, we have 120, we have 135, we have 150. As you can see, there is a pattern going through even quadrant 1 and 2. From 0 to 30, you add 30 degrees. From 30 to 45, you add 15 degrees. From 45 to 60, you add 15 degrees. And from 60 to 90, you add 30 degrees. This pattern stands through the entire unit circle. So with that in mind, I will quickly fill out the rest of the unit circle. So we have 210, we have 225, then we have 240, then we have 270 again, and then we have 300, and then we have 315, and then we have 330. Next off is the radians. We would start with 360, and the conversion for 360 would be 2 pi. At the 90 mark, it's pi over 2. At 180, it will be pi. At 270, it's 3 pi over 2.
Remembering the other radians are going to be a little bit more challenging, but once you memorize a good number of it and use a couple of tricks that we have, it should be relatively easy. So the first ones, these ones are memorization, pi over 6, pi over 4, and pi over 3. For the second quadrant, you're going to base off the numerator and have the denominator 1 more than the value of the numerator, not including the pi. So it would be 2 pi as the numerator, and since 2 is the numerator, 3, which is 2 plus 1, would be the denominator. Likewise, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 6, etc. On quadrant 3, it's going to be the opposite. The denominator is going to have 1 more than the numerator, not including pi. The last quadrant is basically memorization, unless you can imagine how 5 pi over 3, 2 pi would be 6 pi over 3, and 6 pi over 3 minus this 1 pi over 3 would be 5 pi over 3. Likewise, since 2 pi would be 8 pi over 4, you would take 8 pi over 4 and subtract 1 pi over 4, which would basically be 7 pi over 4. So now we're going to go over the coordinates on the unit circle. Since the unit circle has a radius of 1, finding out the major points, or the ones in red in the picture, are going to be relatively easy. So we're going to start with going over these first. For 360, the coordinates are going to be 1, 0, because seeing that the center, imagining that it's 0, 0, it's gone right 1 unit, so it's going to be 1, 0. Likewise, for the 90 degree, it's going to be 0, 1, and the one on the left on pi will be -1, 0, and finally at 270, it'll be 0, -1. Now, the other coordinates are not going to be whole numbers like the major ones were. So we're going to have one of the tricks that we can use to memorize the other coordinates is that all of them have a denominator of 2. So that'll make things a lot easier. With that, we're going to start with the first quadrant and label the coordinates, the x's and the y's, like so. Also note that the x value for the coordinates are going to be labeled in gold, and the y value is going to be labeled in brown. Now, once you get this trick for the numerator down, the rest of the coordinates should be a breeze. Starting from the 60-degree angle to the 30-degree angle, we're going to go in this order for the x value. Root 1, root 2, and root 3. Notice that I put root 1 for the 60-degree value as 1 because essentially root 1 is the same thing as 1. For the numerator and the y value, we're going to have the very similar values, except it's going to be somewhat inversed. And what I mean by that is, but from 30 degrees to the 60 degrees, you're going to have root 1, root 2, and root 3. Again, like I said before, once you have this quadrant down, you can apply it to the other quadrants, the quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. And what I mean by that is, for quadrant 2, imagining the two purple lines as the x and y axis, the points in the second quadrant would have basically similar values, except the x values would be a negative version, since it is on the left-hand side of the y-axis. So now I'm going to just fill out the denominator as 2, similar to the same way we did in the first quadrant. And I'm just going to do that. Fast forward, fast forward, fast forward. So for the numerator, we're going to follow the similar way to the quadrant 1 and make, like I said, okay, no, this part, just fast forward it as I'm filling it out. Yeah. Again, after making the numerator negative, I'm going to make the y value and just keep it positive because it is still above the x-axis. Moving on to quadrant 3, we're going to have a negative x value and negative y value in comparison to the first quadrant, and that is because it is both under the x-axis and also to the left of the y-axis. Now, you may be wondering, aside from the fact that for numerators, I know that it is root 1, root 2, root 3, and then going the other way around, root 3, root 2, root 1, how do I know where it goes? And with that, there are some small tricks that you can learn to remember that. And that is for the x value of these coordinates on the numerator, it should be root 3. The root 3 should be as close to the x-axis as possible. And what I mean is that as you can see in the unit circle, as I'm filling out root 3, root 2, root 1, you can see that for the gold on the coordinates 150, 210, 30, and 330, they're the ones closest to the x-axis, and all of their x values are going to be root 3, whether negative or positive. From this, you can basically fill out the rest of the coordinates because root 3 as the x value will always be paired with root 1 in the y value. And likewise, root 1 as on the x value would be paired with root. You can also note that for the 45-degree angles, like 45, 135, 225, and 315, they're all going to have root 2 over 2 as their x and y values. It just depends on which, depending on the quadrant, it would be negative or positive. When asked to remember the unit circle, it may seem like a very daunting task at first because there's so many different values and numbers, but once you understand the key degrees and radians and the little tricks, it really is quite a possible and easy experience. Thanks for watching.